Well, the front runner to be the next president of the United States, Donald Trump, is now a convicted felon. So one of the world's largest democracies is now in very dangerous and uncharted waters. The stability of the United States now rests partly on his reactions. We saw from the Capitol riots that how some of his supporters are prepared to go out there. This is a country with a lot of guns, ironically, and we saw him before talking about wanting to defend the Constitution of the United States. Ironically, a convicted felon cannot own a gun. So for all of his support from the National Rifle Association and the right of American politics, Donald Trump now can't own a gun. And so for me, the concern is the civil stability and his assault on so many of the institutions that Americans have held dear. The conspiracy theory here, the FBI has been part of the conspiracy theory, the media, the jury, this judge, it was a rigged case, the judge was conflicted. All of these institutions that have been immortalised by American movies and Hollywood, the FBI, the jury system, the judges, even the media, all the president's men, are now said by Donald Trump, the front runner to be president, to be part of this dangerous conspiracy to pervert the course of justice.
And many of these institutions, particularly the judiciary, is the cornerstone of a democracy. What is this all doing to democracy in America?
What it's doing, I think, is it's completely polarising it. He's basically saying, I couldn't get a fair trial because New York's not my territory. That his supporters are saying only 5 to 10% of people in this particular area would ever vote for him. And to suggest the judge is part of it, the Department of Justice. Again, these are all organisations that, whether it was Ronald Reagan or the George Bushes, you know, conservative Republicans in the United States have always acknowledged the primacy of groups like the FBI. So my concern now is that if the supporters of Donald Trump, either with his nod, his quiet nod, or of their own, decide that this has to become something to be decided in the streets, that we could see a dangerous period in the United States.
John, for Trump's critics, this outcome may be seen as a justice served. His supporters might see this verdict as, you know, making him a martyr. But what about those in the middle? We know that the election is going to be determined by those key swing states and those in the middle. How comfortable do you think they are of sending a convicted felon back into the White House?
Well, Catherine, the polls in the last week have been showing between 6 and 7% and 10% of voters who say they would be voting for Donald Trump would reconsider their vote should he be convicted. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that group. That would be enough. At the moment, the election could be very close, but that could be enough to go Joe Biden's way. But as Kim says, there's a lot of, you know, uncertainty at the moment. And I'd be interested, Kim, in getting your thoughts on American democracy has obviously relied on trust in institutions, the Reagan years, the Bush years, the judiciary, law enforcement, FBI. How dangerous do you think it is now that the institutions, that 50% or so of voters who support Donald Trump are now being told that these institutions are corrupted?
Yes, thanks, John. That's the critical question, isn't it, for American democracy? It's very important, and this election is not now going to be just about a race between Trump and Biden. It's going to be a determination by the American voter whether they want to continue to be a nation that is run by the rule of law. So we have a third thing happening in this election, and it's going to play an important part in the campaign.
The timing is really interesting. From now, a couple of key events are going to happen. Obviously, the sentencing's July 11, just 4 days ahead of that Republican conference. How is that likely to play into that event for the Republicans?
It's going to be all that it's going to be about. And depending on what the sentencing is. I mean, if he gets probation, for instance, he will have to request permission from his probation officer to leave the state. You know, he'll have to check in with the criminal justice system whenever he wants to do something outside of the state of New York. So when he wants to go to Milwaukee, which is where the Republican National Convention is, he's going to have to, ask for permission. But, this is going to be all that the Republican convention is about, and they are going to focus on. I think the danger will be that they'll continue their attempt to deconstruct the administrative state of the United States democracy, and there will be a lot of criticism of the judicial system, no doubt.
Interesting, John, you're also making the points there about democracy and the erosion of institutions. Do you think that will be a theme throughout the candidate debates that we are going to see ahead of November?
Well, I think in a way that's Joe Biden's trump card. Sorry about the pun, but that's his major, I think, calling card, because Americans, I think by nature are quite conservative, and Americans do respect their institutions. And I think that although some of them have liked the Trump rhetoric, I think that increasingly some of them will become uncomfortable with this notion. Also, do they really want a convicted felon in the White House? I mean, in terms of prestige of America, to what extent do those groups, care about that? And I think there's the middle ground in the United States. As Kim says, he's rusted on supporters. But that middle ground, I think there's still a lot of undecided people there who might think that we like stability. It's a big democracy, 333 million people. Democracies can quickly turn into trouble. We saw that at the Capitol riots. Horrible scenes. Law enforcement people getting killed. That's not the United States that most Americans, I've lived there for 3 years, they value the stability of the Constitution, of families, of neighbourhoods. And I think some of them will look at the scenes going on now and think, we thought the Trump phenomenon was interesting, but this is starting to get out of control.